From the book, Understanding the Dismissive Avoidant Attachment Style by Mindy Rivers. What attachment theory is in simple terms? This section is about the basic idea behind attachment theory and why it matters in everyday life. Most people can tell the difference between a relationship that feels steady and one that feels tense, even when they cannot explain why. Attachment theory offers a gentle explanation for that difference by looking at what you learned about closeness over time. When you understand that learning, the things you do in relationships can start to make more sense, especially the things you feel conflicted about. Attachment theory begins with a simple truth about being human. When you are upset, you need more than an answer to the problem. You also need a certain kind of reassurance that comes from being with someone who feels safe. Some people reach for that connection without thinking. Others feel their chest tighten when someone gets close in an emotional moment, even if they care deeply. Attachment theory explains how those reactions can grow from lived experience rather than from a lack of love. The clearest place to see this is at the beginning of life. A baby has strong feelings and no way to talk about them. When the baby is uncomfortable or frightened, their body reacts as if the whole world is unsafe. The baby cannot calm down for long by themselves because they have not had enough time to learn what calm feels like. What they need is an adult to come close and help them settle through presence that feels reassuring. When that presence is steady, the baby learns a quiet lesson about what relationships are for. The baby cries, the caregiver comes, and the baby's body slowly loosens its grip on fear. Over time, the baby begins to expect that comfort is possible. This expectation does not sit in the mind as a thought. It sits in the body as a sense that reaching outward can lead to relief, so there is no need to panic when distress arrives. In a home where comfort is not steady, a different lesson starts to take shape. A caregiver might be loving in some ways but emotionally far away when feelings show up. The caregiver might respond with irritation, so the child learns that emotions bring tension into the room. Sometimes the caregiver is overwhelmed and cannot respond much at all. When these experiences happen again and again, the child begins to expect that reaching out will not help, or that reaching out will come with a cost. A child cannot stop needing comfort, but they can learn to hide their need. They may become quieter when they are upset because being quiet feels safer than being seen. They may learn to distract themselves because asking for help leads to disappointment. This is not a child being difficult. It is a child protecting their bond with the caregiver while also protecting their own heart from repeated hurt. This is where many people misunderstand attachment theory, because they assume the child is choosing a personality. What is really happening is that the child is learning how to survive emotionally in the world they have. If closeness brings warmth, the child stays open to it. If closeness brings strain, the child starts to rely on distance. These are both forms of intelligence, shaped by what works, not by what the child wishes were true. As those early lessons continue, they begin to shape what feels normal. The child grows into a teenager and then an adult, and the old expectations are still there in the background. They might look like confidence or independence. They might look like a strong preference for privacy. Underneath, there is often a very practical belief about what happens when you lean on someone. If support has been reliable, leaning in feels natural. If support has been complicated, leaning in can feel like stepping into danger. This often shows up in adult relationships during stress. For example, someone might come home after a day that left them feeling raw, and they might feel an urge to talk as soon as they see their partner. Being met in that moment helps them return to themselves, and connection feels like the fastest way to breathe again. Someone else might come home with the same stress and feel an urge to go quiet. They might focus on something practical, not because they do not care, but because a practical focus feels safer than opening a door to emotion. These differences can create confusion between people who love each other. One partner might show care by moving closer and offering attention. The other partner might experience that attention as pressure, and their body might react by pulling back. The partner who moved closer can feel rejected, while the partner who pulled back can feel crowded. Attachment theory helps by showing that both reactions can come from learned expectations about safety, rather than from selfishness or cruelty. Attachment theory also explains why people can have surprising reactions to ordinary moments. A simple check-in from someone you love can feel soothing if you are used to being met with kindness. The same check-in can feel like an invitation to criticism if you grew up bracing for disapproval when you had feelings. The adult in front of you might be gentle, but your body may still prepare for an older kind of experience. This can make you feel confused about yourself, because part of you knows you are safe while another part is still on guard. It matters that attachment theory is not meant to put your parents on trial. Many caregivers did their best while also carrying their own pain. Some were raised without emotional comfort and could not offer what they never received. Some were trying to keep a household running and had little space left for tenderness. A child does not need a dramatic story for attachment learning to happen. A child only needs a repeated experience that teaches them whether reaching out is worth it. It also matters that attachment theory is not a life sentence. These patterns can be strong because they were practiced for a long time, but they can change when your life gives you new experiences of closeness. Change usually comes from repeated moments where you risk a little honesty and discover that the other person stays kind. It can also come from learning to stay present with your own feelings long enough to understand them, so you can share them in a way that feels safe. Over time, your expectations can shift from what once happened to what is happening now. Understanding attachment theory in simple terms can bring relief because it offers compassion instead of shame. If you pull back when things get emotional, it might be because distance once helped you stay steady. If you reach for reassurance quickly, it might be because closeness once helped you feel safe. Neither reaction is a moral failure. They are ways of coping that made sense in the context where they formed. As you move through this book, you will keep using this simple idea because it turns confusing relationship moments into something understandable, and it gives you a kinder place to begin. The 4 main styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, fearful avoidant. This section is about the 4 main attachment styles and what they look like in real life. People often hear these labels and assume they are neat categories that capture a whole personality. In truth, they are more like familiar ways of handling closeness when it starts to matter. They show up most clearly when you need reassurance, when you feel misunderstood, or when love begins to feel uncertain. Knowing the 4 styles can help you recognize patterns without turning yourself or anyone else into a stereotype. A secure attachment style is less about being perfect and more about feeling basically safe with closeness. A securely attached person can enjoy independence and also lean on someone when life is hard. When they feel upset, they are more likely to believe that talking will help, and they usually expect that being honest will not destroy the relationship. This does not mean they never get jealous, never shut down, or never avoid a hard conversation. It means that when things go wrong, they tend to return to connection rather than turning connection into a battleground. In everyday relationships, security often looks like a person who can name what they feel without making it someone else's fault. They might say they are hurt or worried in a way that invites closeness instead of demanding it. If their partner needs space, they can feel the discomfort of that and still trust that space does not automatically mean rejection. If they need space, they can ask for it without disappearing. There is a sense that the relationship can breathe and that both people will come back to each other. An anxious attachment style tends to be shaped by experiences where closeness felt important, but not fully reliable. An anxiously attached person often carries a strong sensitivity to small changes in tone, attention, or routine. When they feel uncertainty, their mind naturally looks for what it could mean. They may reach out quickly, not to cause drama, but to restore a sense of safety. Their fear is not a love of chaos. Their fear is that love can disappear when they are not paying attention. This often shows up when a partner seems distracted. For example, someone might text less during a busy week, and the anxiously attached person might feel a wave of alarm. They may start imagining that the relationship is fading, and the feeling can become urgent. They might ask for reassurance, press for clarity, or become unusually focused on the relationship. Underneath, there is usually a longing to feel chosen in a steady way, the kind of choice that does not need to be proven every day. An avoidant attachment style tends to be shaped by experiences where relying on others did not feel safe or comforting. An avoidantly attached person often values independence not only as a preference, but as a kind of protection. They may have learned early that feelings were handled best in private. They might have been praised for being strong and not needing much, or they might have sensed that their needs made other people uncomfortable. Over time, closeness can begin to feel like a situation where you might lose control of yourself, or where you will be asked to give more than you can. In adult life, avoidant attachment often looks like a person who can be warm and appealing while also keeping their inner world carefully guarded. They may enjoy romance in the beginning because it is lighter and less demanding, but as the relationship deepens, they can start to feel uneasy. They might pull back after a very intimate moment, not because they did not like it, but because it woke up a fear of being tied down or emotionally responsible for someone else. When conflict happens, they may want to end the conversation quickly or take space, because too much emotional intensity can feel like being trapped. Fearful avoidant attachment, sometimes called disorganized attachment, often carries elements of both anxiety and avoidance. It can grow from experiences where closeness was desired and also frightening, sometimes because the people who were supposed to provide comfort were also unpredictable. A fearful avoidant person may crave intimacy and feel deeply moved by connection, yet they can also become overwhelmed by it. They may move toward someone quickly and then retreat suddenly when it starts to feel too real. This often shows up as a painful push and pull. For example, a person might feel lonely and seek closeness, and when they receive it, they might suddenly feel exposed. They might worry that the other person will hurt them, judge them, or leave them, and those worries can lead them to withdraw or become reactive. The conflict inside is not a lack of love. It is a tug-of-war between wanting connection and trying to stay safe. Although these styles are described separately, real people can be more complex. Someone can be secure with friends and avoidant in romance. Someone can be anxious with one partner and calmer with another. The style that shows up most strongly often depends on how safe the relationship feels and on what kind of closeness is being asked for. A person may handle everyday affection well but struggle when someone asks for deeper emotional honesty. Another person may share feelings easily but struggle when they fear someone will leave. It can help to see each style as answering the same question in a different way. When you feel uncertain in love, do you move toward your partner to restore closeness? Or do you move away to restore control? Secure attachment tends to hold both closeness and space without panic. Anxious attachment tends to move toward. Avoidant attachment tends to move away. Fearful avoidant attachment can swing between the two, sometimes within the same day. These patterns can collide in ways that are heartbreaking when people do not understand what is happening. One common situation looks like this. An anxious person feels distance and reaches out, asking for reassurance or more time together. The avoidant person feels that reaching is pressure and pulls back to breathe. The anxious person then feels more alarm and reaches harder, while the avoidant person feels more crowded and retreats further. Neither person is trying to be cruel. They are each trying to find safety using the only path that has worked for them in the past. Security can be learned, but it is usually learned through experiences that feel steady over time. A securely attached partner can help an anxious person feel calmer, especially when reassurance is offered without irritation. A securely attached partner can also help an avoidant person feel less trapped, especially when space is respected and closeness is invited rather than demanded. Still, even with a secure partner, change is not instant, because old patterns tend to surface in moments of stress. It is also possible for two insecure styles to build something beautiful together, but it usually requires more care and more honesty. A fearful avoidant person often needs gentleness around, both closeness and space, because both can activate fear. An avoidant person often needs patience with vulnerability because they may not have practiced showing softer feelings. An anxious person often needs consistency because uncertainty can feel like a threat. When these needs are handled with respect, attachment patterns can soften. Naming the 4 styles is not meant to give you a new way to judge yourself or your partner. It is meant to give you language for the part of love that feels automatic. When you can name what happens, you can slow down inside it. You can recognize that your reaction is not the whole truth. It is a protective response that has a history. That recognition can create a small pause, and in that pause you can choose a different step. The goal of learning these styles is to bring kindness and clarity into your relationships. If you notice that you move toward people when you are scared, you can learn how to reach in a way that invites connection without grabbing for it. If you notice that you move away when things get intense, you can learn how to take space without making the other person feel abandoned. If you swing between the two, you can learn how to stay anchored long enough to understand what you are afraid of. Whatever your style, it makes sense in context, and it can change through steady, respectful experiences of love. Why attachment styles matter in adult life. This section is about why attachment styles matter long after childhood is over. Many people assume that once you are grown, your relationships are mainly about compatibility and effort. Those things do matter, but they do not explain why you can be calm with one person and tense with another, or why you can know you are loved and still feel the urge to pull away. Attachment styles matter because they shape how you interpret closeness. They influence what you do when you are hurt, how you ask for what you need, and what you assume will happen when you let someone in. Adult life asks for connection in quiet ways and in big ways. You might need support when you are grieving, when you feel overwhelmed, or when you are proud and want to be celebrated. You might also need someone to stay steady with you when you are not at your best, when you are irritable, when you shut down, or when you cannot explain what you feel. In those moments, your attachment style becomes more than a concept. It becomes your default way of protecting yourself, even when protection is not the same as what you actually want. One reason attachment styles matter is that they shape your sense of what is normal in love. If you grew up in a world where closeness was warm and reliable, you may naturally expect that a partner will be there for you and that you can be there for them. You might not fear ordinary needs. You might not feel ashamed of wanting comfort. If you grew up in a world where closeness was complicated, you may expect that love has a price, and you may brace for the moment when you will have to pay it. You might not consciously think that, but you may feel it when the relationship deepens. This often shows up in the way people handle dependence. In adult relationships, dependence is not only financial or practical. It is also emotional. You depend on your partner's care, their loyalty, their willingness to understand you, and their ability to stay present when things get hard. That kind of dependence can feel tender and beautiful to one person. To another, it can feel like stepping into a trap. If your early life taught you that needing someone leads to disappointment, you may work hard to keep your needs small so you never have to feel that disappointment again. Attachment styles also matter because they influence how you read other people's behavior. A partner who needs time alone can feel respectful and healthy to someone who trusts the relationship. The same behavior can feel like rejection to someone who has learned that distance means danger. On the other side, a partner who asks for closeness can feel loving to someone who welcomes emotional talk. The same request can feel invasive to someone who has learned that closeness leads to criticism, loss of control, or demands they cannot meet. Two people can be describing the same moment and living in completely different emotional worlds. One common situation looks like this. Two people care about each other and both want the relationship to work. One person feels stressed and reaches out, wanting a conversation to feel close again. The other person feels stressed and wants quiet to feel steady again. If they do not understand attachment patterns, they may assume the worst. The one who reaches may assume the other does not care. The one who withdraws may assume the other is trying to control them. These assumptions can create hurt that is not actually about the love between them. It is about the meaning each person gives to closeness and space. Attachment styles matter because they shape your relationship with conflict. Conflict is not only about solving a problem, it is also about staying connected while the problem is present. Some people feel safer when conflict is talked through right away because leaving it unresolved feels like emotional distance. Other people feel safer when conflict pauses because intense conversation can feel overwhelming. Neither approach is automatically wrong. The trouble comes when each person assumes their approach is the only caring approach. Attachment awareness helps couples understand that timing, tone, and repair matter as much as the content of the disagreement. Your attachment style also influences what you do with your feelings. Some people can feel sadness or fear and still stay connected to the people around them. They might cry in front of someone and experience it as relief. Others feel exposed when emotion rises. They might get quiet or distracted, or they might focus on facts and solutions because feelings in the room can feel like a loss of dignity. If you have an avoidant style, you may recognize the desire to keep your inner world private, not because you want to be distant, but because being seen can feel like being vulnerable in a way you do not fully trust. Attachment styles matter in friendships too, even though the stakes may feel lower than romance. A friend might be hurt that you do not call often, while you feel your loyalty in a different way through showing up when it matters. Another friend might want emotional closeness through regular sharing, while you feel close through shared activities and humor. Without understanding attachment, people often assume their way of connecting is the correct way. With understanding, you can see that people signal care differently based on what closeness has meant to them. They matter at work as well. You might feel uncomfortable when a manager wants a personal check-in, or you might feel anxious when feedback is vague. You might avoid asking for help because you do not want to be seen as needy, or you might ask repeatedly because you fear being left to fail. These are not professional skill issues alone. They are often relationship patterns playing out in a new setting, where authority, dependence, and approval can stir up old feelings. Another reason attachment styles matter is that they affect the partners you choose and the relationships you maintain. People tend to be drawn to what feels familiar, even when what feels familiar is painful. An avoidant person may be drawn to someone who does not demand much at first, because that feels like breathing room. An anxious person may be drawn to someone who feels exciting but inconsistent, because the longing feels like love. Familiarity is not the same as health, but it can be hard to tell them apart until you understand your own patterns. Attachment styles matter because they influence what you tolerate. If you learned early that your needs were too much, you may settle for relationships where your needs remain unspoken. You may tell yourself you are fine without much emotional care, even when you feel lonely. If you learned early that love disappears easily, you may tolerate mixed signals or emotional highs and lows because you are focused on keeping the bond. Understanding attachment can help you see what you have been normalizing, not to shame yourself, but to offer yourself a chance to choose differently. They also matter because they can create a cycle that feels bigger than any one moment. In an anxious and avoidant pairing, the anxious partner's reaching can make the avoidant partner pull away, and the avoidant partner's distance can make the anxious partner reach harder. Over time, both people feel unseen. The anxious partner feels alone in their longing, and the avoidant partner feels alone in their need for space. When you understand that cycle, you can stop treating each other as the problem and start treating the pattern as the problem. This is especially important for avoidant attachment, because avoidance often looks like strength from the outside. A person may seem calm and capable while quietly feeling strained by intimacy. They may be praised for being low drama, while inside they are working hard to keep their feelings contained. Over time, that containment can take a toll. It can lead to loneliness, to numbness, or to relationships that never quite feel as deep as the person secretly wants. Attachment awareness can help an avoidant person understand that the cost of distance is real, even when distance feels like relief in the moment. Attachment styles matter because they offer a path toward healing that is practical. Healing is not only about insight. It is also about learning new ways to respond when your old defenses turn on. An anxious person can learn to soothe themselves enough to ask for closeness without panic. An avoidant person can learn to stay present a little longer and to express needs without feeling weak. A fearful avoidant person can learn to move toward stability rather than swinging between extremes. Secure people can also grow by understanding how to create safety for others without losing themselves. There is something deeply comforting about realizing that your relationship reactions are not random. They have roots. They have reasons. They were shaped by the ways you learned to stay connected while staying safe. When you see that, you can meet yourself with more patience. You can also begin to relate to others with more compassion, because you can imagine that their reactions make sense too, even when those reactions hurt. Attachment styles matter in adult life, because love does not only test whether you care. Love tests whether you can stay connected when you feel uncertain, when you feel exposed, and when you feel disappointed. Your attachment style shapes how you meet those tests. The good news is that once you understand your patterns, you are not stuck repeating them. You can learn to build relationships that feel both honest and safe, with room for closeness and room for breathing. And that kind of love is worth the work it takes to create. How dismissive avoidant differs from other avoidants. This section is about a distinction that can quietly change the way you understand yourself. People often use the word avoidant as if it means one single thing, as if everyone who pulls back from closeness is doing it for the same reason and in the same way. In real life, avoidance can come from different kinds of fear, and it can look different depending on what a person learned to do with their needs. Understanding the dismissive avoidant style in particular matters, because it often gets misunderstood, even by the person living it. It can feel like simple independence, when it is actually a carefully built way of staying safe in relationships. Avoidant attachment is a broad description of what happens when closeness starts to feel uncomfortable. It is about how a person responds when someone wants emotional intimacy, wants reassurance, or wants to talk about feelings that have weight. Some avoidant people pull away because they feel overwhelmed by the emotional energy of closeness, but they still feel a strong pull toward love. Other avoidant people pull away in a more confident way, as if they do not need much at all. Both are forms of avoidance, but the inner experience can be very different. Dismissive avoidant attachment often looks calm on the surface. A dismissive avoidant person may appear self-assured, capable, and grounded. They may have learned to present themselves as someone who does not get shaken easily, someone who can handle anything. They might have a strong sense of pride in being independent, and that pride is not fake. They may truly have developed skills, focus, and self-control. The key difference is that independence is not only a value, it is often the main emotional safety strategy. This often begins with a lesson that needing others does not work well. The dismissive avoidant child may have been cared for in practical ways while emotional needs were minimized. The child might have been told they were fine when they were not, or they might have sensed that their sadness made adults uncomfortable. Over time, the child learns that it is better to handle feelings privately. They may stop reaching for comfort, not because they no longer need it, but because reaching has not led to the kind of warmth that makes reaching worth it. As an adult, this can create a particular kind of strength. A dismissive avoidant person often becomes very good at functioning through pain. They can keep showing up, keep performing, and keep solving problems, even when something inside hurts. They may not think of this as emotional distance. They may think of it as maturity. In many parts of life, that capacity looks like success, which can make it harder to notice the cost. The cost often shows up when relationships ask for emotional presence rather than competence. A partner might say, "I just want you to talk to me," and the dismissive avoidant person might genuinely not know what to say. They may feel flooded by the expectation, as if they are being asked to produce something they were never taught how to offer. They may become irritated, not because they want to be mean, but because irritation gives them a sense of power and distance when they feel exposed. They might also shut down because silence can feel safer than saying the wrong thing. Fearful avoidant attachment, which is sometimes also described as avoidant, often has a different emotional flavor. A fearful avoidant person can long for closeness and feel anxious about losing it, yet they can also fear closeness and mistrust it. Their avoidance is often mixed with a sense of alarm. They may feel drawn to intimacy and then suddenly panic when it arrives. They might worry about being hurt, being rejected, or being controlled. Their behavior can shift quickly because they're trying to solve two opposite fears at the same time. In contrast, dismissive avoidance often feels more stable and more certain. The dismissive avoidant person may not feel the same obvious fear about abandonment. They might believe they are safer alone, and they might feel confident that they could walk away if they needed to. They may even feel puzzled by people who seem to need a lot of reassurance. Their discomfort is often more about feeling intruded upon or obligated than about being left. This difference matters in how relationships play out. A fearful avoidant person might send mixed signals because they are caught between longing and fear. A dismissive, avoidant person might send mixed signals because closeness feels good for a moment and then starts to feel like pressure, even if nothing dramatic has happened. One common situation looks like this. The relationship has a warm night of connection, and the next day the dismissive, avoidant person feels a strong urge to reestablish distance. They might become busy, less responsive, or emotionally flat. The partner might wonder what changed, but what changed is the avoidant person's internal sense of being too close for comfort. Dismissive avoidance also tends to rely on deactivating strategies, which is a way of saying the person finds ways to turn down their attachment needs. They may focus on a partner's flaws to create emotional distance. They may tell themselves the relationship is not that important. They may idealize freedom and treat commitment as a loss. They may keep their schedule full so that they rarely have to sit in the quiet vulnerability of needing someone. These moves can happen without malice. They are often automatic ways of easing the discomfort that intimacy brings. Another difference is how each avoidant style experiences emotion. A fearful avoidant person might feel a lot of emotion and then shut down because it becomes too much. A dismissive avoidant person might feel emotion as something distant. as if it is happening behind a glass wall. They can still have deep feelings, but they might not recognize them until later. Or they might experience them as physical tension rather than as sadness or longing. This can create a strange gap where their partner senses something is happening, while they feel confused about what they are supposed to be expressing. Dismissive avoidant attachment can also create a particular kind of relationship rhythm. There may be closeness when the avoidant person feels in control, such as when they choose the time and place of intimacy. There may be distance when the partner initiates emotional conversation or asks for reassurance. The avoidant person may feel fine during light connection, then feel uneasy when the conversation turns toward needs, expectations, or the future. It is not that they do not want love. It is that love feels safest when it stays on terms they can manage. This can be deeply painful for both people. The partner may feel like they are never fully let in, no matter how patient they are. The dismissive avoidant person may feel like they are constantly being asked to become someone else, someone more open and emotionally expressive than they know how to be. They may feel guilty and also resentful, which is a confusing combination. They may want to offer love and feel unable to do it in the way their partner recognizes, which can lead to shame that they would rather not talk about. Dismissive avoidant people are often described as not needing anyone, but that is rarely the whole truth. Many have a hidden tenderness and a strong capacity for loyalty. They may show love through responsibility, through fixing problems, through practical support, or through steady presence when life is hard. The problem is not that they have no love. The problem is that the kind of love they learn to offer may not include emotional vulnerability, because vulnerability once felt unsafe. This often shows up in the way dismissive avoidants handle being cared for. They may feel uncomfortable receiving help, even when they need it. They might brush off kindness, change the subject, or insist they are fine. Being cared for can feel like debt, and debt can feel like danger. If they accept support, they may worry that it means they will be controlled or that the other person will expect something they cannot give. Refusing support feels safer, even when it creates distance. Understanding these differences is not about deciding who is more wounded or who has it harder. It is about accuracy, because accurate understanding leads to kinder choices. If you are dismissive avoidant, it can help to see that your need for space is not only a preference. It is often a response to a lifetime of learning that closeness brings pressure. If you love someone who is dismissive avoidant, it can help to see that their distance is not always a lack of love. It is often a way of calming themselves when intimacy feels intense. When you recognize dismissive avoidant attachment clearly, you can begin to work with it instead of fighting it. You can start to notice the moments when you feel the urge to pull away, and you can ask what you are protecting. You can learn to take space in a way that still stays connected, so your partner does not feel abandoned. You can practice small moments of emotional honesty that do not overwhelm you, and you can let trust build through repetition. The goal is not to erase independence. The goal is to make room for closeness without making it feel like a threat. Common myths about attachment. This section is about the myths people pick up about attachment, and why those myths can keep you stuck in shame or blame. Attachment theory is meant to be a soft light, not a harsh spotlight. It is supposed to help you understand why certain relationship moments feel so intense, even when you are trying your best. When myths take over, attachment becomes another way to judge yourself or label other people, and that is the opposite of what it is for. One common myth is that attachment style is just a personality trait, like being outgoing or quiet. People will say, "I am avoidant because I like my space," or "I am anxious because I am sensitive," as if the style is simply a preference. Preferences are real, and it is healthy to honor them, but attachment goes deeper than preference. Attachment shows up most clearly when you feel emotionally threatened, when you fear disconnection, or when you feel exposed. In those moments, the reaction often has less to do with what you like and more to do with what your history taught you is safe. Another myth is that attachment style is permanent. People sometimes read a description and feel a heavy hopelessness, as if they have been handed a diagnosis that cannot change. Attachment patterns can be stubborn because they are learned early and practiced often, but they are not destiny. They are a set of expectations that can shift when life gives you repeated experiences that feel different. Change tends to happen slowly and through relationships that are steady enough to hold discomfort. Even when change is slow, the direction can be real. A different myth is that one attachment style is the good one and the others are bad. Secure attachment gets treated as the prize, while anxious and avoidant styles get treated like problems to fix. Security is often easier, but every style is a way of trying to stay safe in love. An anxious person is often reaching for reassurance because closeness calms them. An avoidant person is often reaching for distance because distance calms them. These are both understandable responses when you consider the experiences that shape them. Calling one good and the other bad turns a human story into a moral story, and moral stories create shame. There is also a myth that avoidant people do not want love. This one is especially painful because it makes avoidant individuals feel unseen, and it makes their partners feel hopeless. Many avoidant people want love deeply, but they want it in a way that does not cost them their sense of self. They may want closeness that feels chosen rather than demanded, and they may want emotional conversation that feels calm rather than intense. If they pull away, it is often because intimacy is touching an old fear, not because affection is missing. The opposite myth exists too, and it can be just as damaging. Some people believe anxious individuals are needy in a childish way, as if they are trying to be rescued rather than loved. In reality, anxious attachment is often the product of real inconsistency in the past. When a person has learned that love can vanish without warning, they can become highly alert to signs of distance. Their desire for reassurance is not an attempt to control. It is an attempt to feel safe enough to relax and be present. When this is misunderstood, the anxious person often feels embarrassed for having needs they did not choose. Another myth is that attachment theory is mainly about blaming your parents. People hear that early relationships matter and immediately feel defensive either toward their parents or toward themselves. Some readers worry that learning about attachment means they have to search for someone to blame, or that they have to build a case against the adults who raised them. That is not what attachment is for. Understanding your early experience can be done with compassion for everyone involved. A caregiver can love a child and still be emotionally unavailable in ways that shape the child. A child can be impacted by that unavailability without needing to hate the caregiver. A related myth is that only obvious trauma creates insecure attachment. People often imagine that unless something extreme happened, their struggle should not be that serious. That belief can make people dismiss their own pain. Attachment patterns can form in quiet households where feelings are not talked about, where comfort is offered only for physical problems, or where tenderness is rare. A child can learn to be self-sufficient because it feels easier than being disappointed, and that lesson can follow them into adulthood. Nothing dramatic has to happen for loneliness to take root. There is also a myth that knowing your attachment style automatically solves the problem. People will take a quiz, learn a label, and then wonder why they still get triggered, shut down, or become anxious in a relationship. Insight helps, but attachment is not only an idea in your mind, it is also a set of reactions in your body and habits in your relationships. Those habits were built through repetition, so change also comes through repetition. Naming your style is a beginning, not an ending. A myth that shows up often online is that you should avoid dating avoidant people entirely, as if they are incapable of commitment or empathy. This kind of advice can come from real hurt, and it makes sense that people want to protect themselves. Still, it can become a harsh story that erases the humanity of avoidant individuals. Many avoidant people are capable of deep love, loyalty, and growth, especially when they are willing to reflect on their patterns. The question is not whether someone has an avoidant style. The question is whether they can take responsibility for how their style affects others. Another myth is that secure people never struggle. Security does not mean you never get jealous, never feel scared, or never make mistakes. Secure people can have painful breakups, hard childhoods, and moments of shutting down. The difference is often that they have a stronger sense that they can repair. They can talk, listen, and return to connection more easily. When people mythologize security as perfection, they miss the point that security is mainly about a willingness to stay engaged, rather than run or cling. Some myths are more subtle and show up inside your own self-talk. One is the belief that if you were truly strong, you would not need anyone. This belief often sits under dismissive avoidance. It can sound noble, like independence, but it can also be a lonely standard that keeps you from receiving comfort. Real strength includes knowing when to let yourself be held by other people's care. Another subtle myth is the belief that if you ask for reassurance, you are being burdensome. That belief can sit under anxious attachment, and can keep you trapped between longing and shame. A myth that hurts couples is the idea that one person's attachment style is the entire problem. It can be tempting to say, if my partner would just stop being avoidant, we would be fine. Or, if my partner would just stop being anxious, we would be fine. In reality, most relationship pain is created by a dance between two people's protections. One person's pursuit can intensify the other person's withdrawal, and the withdrawal can intensify the pursuit. When both people can see the dance, it becomes easier to stop blaming and start changing what happens in the moment. This often shows up when couples try to talk about needs. The anxious partner may be trying to describe loneliness, while the avoidant partner hears criticism. The avoidant partner may be trying to describe overwhelm, while the anxious partner hears rejection. If they both believe myths, they will interpret each other through harsh stereotypes. The anxious partner becomes needy, and the avoidant partner becomes cold. Those words do not create understanding. They create distance and defensiveness. Attachment theory is meant to offer a kinder story. It says that your reactions make sense in context. It says you learn to protect yourself in ways that helped you survive emotionally. It says you can honor the intelligence of those protections while also noticing the cost. When you let go of the myths, you can become more curious about what is happening inside you and inside the people you love. The truth is that attachment is not about labels you slap on yourself. It is about the tender places where you learned what love feels like when you need it. If you have been living with avoidance, you likely learned that closeness can come with pressure, and your need for space is a way of keeping yourself steady. If you have been living with anxiety, you likely learned that closeness can be uncertain, and your reaching is a way of trying to keep love near. Both of these are human. Both can change. Letting go of the myths is one of the first ways to make room for that change. Why people often misunderstand dismissive avoidance. This section is about why dismissive avoidant people are so often misunderstood, even by people who love them and want to get close. Misunderstanding does not happen because others are cruel or because dismissive avoidants are impossible. It happens because their protective style can look like something else from the outside. A person can be caring and loyal while also seeming distant. They can be steady in a crisis while feeling uncomfortable with emotional conversations. When someone's love language is not openly emotional, it is easy for others to assume the love is not there. One reason dismissive avoidants are misunderstood is that they often look confident. Many of them have learned to handle life by being capable. They may be good at work, good at solving problems, and good at showing up when something practical needs to be done. They may not appear fragile, and they may not talk about inner struggles. When a person looks strong, others naturally assume they are fine. Then, when that person pulls away from intimacy, the withdrawal is seen as a choice rather than as a protective reflex. The partner might think, if you can handle everything else, why can you not handle this? And the question makes sense. Still, it misses how different emotional dependence can feel from practical competence. Another reason is that dismissive avoidants often communicate love indirectly. They may show care through actions rather than emotional reassurance. They may fix things, plan things, provide stability, and stay loyal over years. For some partners, that feels deeply loving. For others, it feels incomplete because they long for emotional presence, for words that name the bond, or for conversations that create a sense of being known. When the partner asks for those things, the avoidant person may feel criticized, as if their efforts are invisible. The partner may feel lonely, as if love is being withheld. Both experiences can be true at the same time. This often shows up when someone says, I just want you to open up. The partner may mean, I want to feel close to you, but the dismissive avoidant person may hear, you are not good enough the way you are. That interpretation is not stubbornness. It can come from a long history of feeling that emotional needs lead to judgment. If the avoidant person learned early that feelings were inconvenient, they may have had to become someone who did not have many. Being asked to open up can feel like being asked to dismantle the very structure that helped them survive. Dismissive avoidants are also misunderstood because their withdrawal can happen after good moments. Many partners expect distance after conflict, but they do not expect distance after closeness. For example, a couple might have a tender evening where they talk, connect, and even share affection that feels deeply meaningful. The next day, the avoidant partner might feel the urge to be busy or emotionally flat. The other partner often experiences that shift as confusing and painful, because it feels like the closeness was not real. For the avoidant person, the closeness was real, but it also activated a fear of being too needed, too known, or too emotionally responsible. Another misunderstanding comes from the way dismissive avoidants handle conflict. When emotions rise, many of them try to get back to calm quickly. They might change the subject, make a joke, focus on logic, or ask to take a break. To a partner who wants emotional repair, this can feel like avoidance or dismissal. It can feel as if the avoidant person is refusing to care. From the avoidant person's side, the intensity can feel like a wave that will not stop. They may be trying to prevent escalation, because escalation feels dangerous, even if the partner is not actually being threatening. The goal is often self-control, not cruelty. Dismissive avoidants are also misunderstood because of the way they use language. They may speak in short sentences when emotional topics come up. They might say they are fine when they are not sure what they feel. They might describe their partner as overreacting, not because they want to insult them, but because they genuinely experience emotion as overwhelming and hard to manage. When your inner world has been organized around staying steady, strong emotion in the room can feel like chaos. It can be hard to remember that the other person is not creating chaos. They are sharing their experience. A painful misunderstanding is the belief that dismissive avoidants do not have feelings. Many of them do have deep feelings, but they do not always experience those feelings in an obvious way. They may notice tension in their body rather than sadness in their heart. They may feel irritated rather than frightened. They may become restless, or they may feel a desire to leave the room. The partner may interpret this as indifference, when it is often a sign of inner pressure that the avoidant person does not know how to name. This often shows up when a partner is crying. Some dismissive avoidants want to help but freeze, because they do not know what the right move is. They might have grown up in a home where tears were mocked or ignored. They may have learned that tears lead to conflict, shame, or helplessness. When they face their partner's tears, old discomfort can rush in. They may look away or become quiet, and their partner may feel abandoned. Inside, the avoidant person may feel scared of doing harm, scared of being pulled into an emotional demand they cannot meet, or simply unsure of how to comfort without feeling overwhelmed. Dismissive avoidants are misunderstood because they often need more time to process. Some people can talk while they feel. Others need to feel first and talk later. Dismissive avoidants often fall into the second category, but their processing may happen under the surface. They may not want to talk in the moment because they cannot find their words. They may need silence to sort out what they actually think and feel. A partner who wants immediate conversation can interpret this as stonewalling, while the avoidant person experiences it as a necessary pause to stay regulated and respectful. There is also misunderstanding around boundaries. A dismissive avoidant person may set boundaries quickly when they feel crowded. They may insist on alone time, private space, or independence in daily routines. To a partner who equates closeness with togetherness, this can feel like rejection. In truth, many dismissive avoidants can be more loving when their boundaries are honored because they feel less trapped. The problem is that boundaries and distance can look identical from the outside, especially when the avoidant person does not explain what they need in a warm way. Another reason dismissive avoidants are misunderstood is that they are often charming early on. In the beginning of a relationship, they may feel free to be attentive because the stakes feel lower. They can enjoy the excitement and the fun. As the relationship deepens, the partner might expect that warmth to become even more consistent. Instead, the avoidant person may begin to pull back. The partner can feel tricked, as if the early version was fake. Often, it was not fake. It was real closeness that felt safe because it did not yet carry the weight of expectation. This dynamic can create a story in the partner's mind that the avoidant person is selfish. Sometimes avoidant behavior can be selfish, because all humans can be selfish, especially when scared. Still, the deeper truth is often that the avoidant person is trying to manage fear without knowing how to say so. They may not even experience it as fear. They may experience it as irritation, boredom, or the sense that the relationship is becoming too much. When fear is disguised like that, both partners can misread what is happening. Dismissive avoidants are also misunderstood because they can seem fine after a breakup. They might move on quickly or act as if it did not matter. Sometimes this is a true relief. Other times, it is a form of emotional protection, where grief is pushed down because it feels unbearable to face. The partner who was left can feel erased, as if the relationship meant nothing. The dismissive, avoidant person may later feel waves of sadness they cannot explain, sometimes months later when they are alone and something reminds them of what they lost. Understanding these misunderstandings does not mean ignoring hurt. If you love someone, it matters how your behavior affects them. If you are a partner to a dismissive avoidant, it matters that your loneliness is real. Still, the path toward change becomes clearer when you see what is underneath the distance. Dismissive avoidants often need their emotional world to be approached with patience, because pressure tends to create more retreat. They often respond better to calm invitations than to demands, because invitations allow them to choose closeness without losing dignity. For dismissive avoidants themselves, it can be healing to realize that being misunderstood is not proof that you are unlovable. It is often proof that your style of coping is hard for others to read. When you begin to name what is happening inside you, even in small ways, you give the people who love you a map. You also give yourself a way to stay connected without feeling trapped. Over time, misunderstanding can turn into understanding, not because anyone becomes perfect, but because both people learn to translate each other's protective language into something more human and more kind. How attachment theory explains patterns, not personal failures. This section is about one of the most important gifts attachment theory can offer, which is a way to understand your relationship patterns without turning them into a story about what is wrong with you. Many people come to attachment theory after years of confusion. They might have had relationships that start with warmth and end with distance. They might have felt themselves shut down at the exact moment they wanted to be close. They might have watched themselves reach for reassurance and then feel ashamed for needing it. When you do not have a framework, these experiences can feel like proof that you are broken. Attachment theory offers a different interpretation. It says you are patterned, and your patterns were shaped by what you lived through. A personal failure story usually sounds like a character judgment. It says you are too needy, too cold, too sensitive, too selfish, or too much work. These judgments can become an inner voice that follows you into every relationship. You might try to behave differently through willpower, but the old reactions keep showing up, which can make you feel even more discouraged. Attachment theory does not deny that behavior matters. It simply says behavior is often a response to expectation. If you can understand the expectation, you can begin to understand the behavior. Patterns are different from failures because patterns have logic. The logic might be outdated, but it once made sense. For example, if you learned early that comfort was not available, it would make sense to stop reaching for comfort. If you learned that attention could disappear, it would make sense to monitor closeness and look for signs of distance. If you learned that emotion led to criticism, it would make sense to keep emotion private. None of these responses are evidence of a defective heart. They are evidence of adaptation. This matters because shame makes change harder. When you believe you are fundamentally flawed, you tend to protect yourself from being seen. You might hide your needs, hide your fears, or hide your tenderness. You may also become defensive when someone points out a pattern, because the pattern feels like proof of the flaw you already fear is true. Attachment theory can soften that defensive loop by offering a more compassionate explanation. It says, "This is what you learned," instead of, "This is who you are." One common situation looks like this in a relationship. A partner asks for more closeness, and the dismissive, avoidant person feels a surge of irritation or numbness. If they tell themselves, "I am a bad partner," they might withdraw further out of shame. They might shut down because they do not want to be confronted with their own inability to meet the request. The partner then feels even more alone, and the conflict escalates. If the avoidant person instead understands the pattern, they might recognize that the request has triggered an old fear of being obligated or overwhelmed. That recognition does not magically fix the moment, but it creates a chance to respond with more honesty and less self-attack. Patterns also show up in the way people choose partners. If you have an anxious style, you may be drawn to people who feel exciting and unpredictable, and you might interpret the emotional high of longing as proof of love. If you have an avoidant style, you may be drawn to people who feel low demand at first, and you might interpret the calm of distance as proof of compatibility. These choices can repeat until you understand what you are actually responding to. Attachment theory helps you notice that you might be choosing familiarity rather than health, not because you are foolish, but because your body trusts what it knows. Another reason attachment theory focuses on patterns is that patterns show up across time, not only in one moment. A personal failure story tends to focus on a single incident, like a fight or a breakup, and it asks, "What is wrong with me that I did that?" A pattern story asks, "What is the repeated sequence?" It looks at the rhythm, such as closeness followed by distance, or reassurance followed by distrust. When you see the rhythm, you can start to work with it. You can prepare for the moment when the pattern usually turns, which gives you more power than trying to fix yourself after the fact. Attachment theory also helps because it places your behavior in a relationship context. Many relationship problems are not created by one person alone. They are created by the way two protective styles interact. An anxious person reaches for closeness to feel safe. An avoidant person takes space to feel safe. When those moves collide, both people can feel threatened. The anxious person feels abandoned, and the avoidant person feels crowded. Without an attachment lens, each person may label the other as the problem. With an attachment lens, both can see that the pattern has its own momentum. That understanding can lower blame and open the door to repair. This does not mean there is no accountability. Understanding a pattern is not the same as excusing it. If you withdraw without explanation, your partner can still be hurt. If you demand reassurance in a way that becomes controlling, your partner can still feel trapped. Attachment theory invites you to take responsibility without collapsing into shame. You can say, "This is what I do when I am scared," and also say, "I want to learn a different way." That combination is powerful because it honors the reality of your experience while also honoring the impact on others. It is especially important to understand patterns if you are dismissive avoidant, because dismissive avoidance often comes with a strong self-concept of being rational and steady. When emotional conflict happens, it can feel like the other person is being unreasonable, and it can be tempting to treat your withdrawal as the mature response. Attachment theory helps you see that withdrawal is often a protective response, not a neutral one. It helps you notice that you may be trying to protect your sense of control, and control can become a substitute for intimacy. When you see that, you can begin to choose closeness in ways that still feel respectful to your need for steadiness. Patterns also explain why you can genuinely love someone and still act in ways that push them away. Love is a feeling and an intention, but attachment patterns are often automatic. You might feel tenderness for your partner and still go quiet when they want emotional conversation. You might want connection and still find yourself criticizing their needs. These contradictions can feel confusing, and they can lead to harsh self-judgments. A pattern explanation helps you hold both truths. You can love someone and also protect yourself in ways that create distance. Seeing that clearly is the first step toward changing it. Another gift of pattern thinking is that it can reduce the fear of being uniquely damaged. When you see your reactions as patterns, you realize that many people have similar responses shaped by similar experiences. That does not make your pain smaller, but it can make you feel less alone. It can also help you speak about your struggles in a way that invites compassion from others. When you say, "This is my pattern," you are not confessing a defect. You are sharing a human story about learning and protection. This often becomes most meaningful when you look back at your earlier life with gentleness. A dismissive avoidant pattern might have formed in a home where feelings were not welcomed. A child in that home might have learned to be easy, competent, and low maintenance. Those traits may have brought praise, which can make them feel like pure strengths. The child may have learned that being strong keeps you connected, while being needy risks rejection. That is a heartbreaking lesson for a child, and it makes complete sense that the child would build a life around never needing too much. If you carry that lesson into adulthood, you might struggle when a partner asks for emotional closeness, because it pulls you into a territory that once felt unsafe. You might feel pressure to perform emotionally, and performance is not intimacy. You might feel cornered by someone else's needs, because you learned early that needs can overwhelm relationships. When you understand this as a pattern, you can start to soften your relationship with your own needs. You can begin to believe that needing does not automatically destroy love. Pattern thinking also helps you recognize progress. If you treat your attachment style as a failure, any setback feels like proof that you cannot change. If you treat it as a pattern, you can notice small shifts. You might still need space, but you might explain it more warmly. You might still feel flooded in conflict, but you might return sooner to repair. You might still have trouble naming feelings, but you might try to name one small piece of what is true. These changes matter because relationships are built from many moments, and many moments can create a new expectation over time. Attachment theory explains patterns, not personal failures, because it is trying to give you hope that is grounded in reality. It says your reactions are understandable, and it says you can learn new ways of being close. It invites you to treat yourself with respect while also being honest about what your protection costs you. When you begin to see your story as a pattern story, you step out of shame and into understanding. From that place, you can choose growth, and you can build relationships that feel safer, steadier, and more real. The purpose of this book and what it will give you. This section is about why this book exists and what it is meant to offer you. If you picked up a book about avoidant attachment, there is a good chance you are carrying some kind of ache. You might be tired of repeating the same relationship story. You might be trying to understand someone you love who seems to pull away. You might be trying to understand yourself, especially the parts of you that feel strong and the parts that feel unreachable, even to you. This book is here to bring clarity and tenderness to that story, so you can stop treating it like a mystery and start treating it like something human that can be held and changed. For some readers, the purpose is relief. It can be exhausting to feel like closeness comes with a hidden cost. You may long for love and still feel tense when someone asks for emotional intimacy. You may want a committed relationship and still feel panicky when commitment becomes real. You may care deeply and still struggle to show it in a way that others can feel. When you do not understand what is happening, you can start to believe you are simply not made for love, or that you will always disappoint the people who get close. This book is meant to replace that harsh conclusion with a kinder and more accurate one. For other readers, the purpose is understanding a partner. Loving someone with a dismissive avoidant style can feel confusing. You might see their good heart and their loyalty, yet you might also feel shut out. You might notice how warm they can be at times and how distant they can be at others. You might feel as if you are always reaching for the version of them that appeared early on, and you do not know how to get back to that closeness without creating a fight. This book is meant to help you understand what might be happening inside them, not so you can excuse hurt, but so you can stop taking everything as proof that you are unlovable. The purpose is also to slow the story down. Avoidant attachment often plays out quickly in the nervous system. A partner asks for closeness, the avoidant person feels pressure, and distance follows. The partner then feels hurt and may press harder, which can create more retreat. Soon the relationship is caught in a loop, and both people feel trapped. This book is meant to add space inside that loop, the kind of space where understanding can enter. When you can see the pattern clearly, you can begin to choose different steps, even if the feelings are still there. This book will give you language for experiences that often feel wordless. Dismissive avoidant people commonly struggle to name what they feel, especially in the moment. Partners of dismissive avoidance also struggle, because they feel something important is missing, but they cannot explain it in a way that leads to change. The words in this book are meant to help you describe what is happening without turning it into an accusation. When you can say, "I feel crowded," or "I feel alone," in a way that connects it to a pattern, you are more likely to create empathy instead of defensiveness. It will also give you a way to look at your history without cruelty. Many people with avoidant patterns have a complicated relationship with the idea that childhood matters. They may feel loyal to their family and want to avoid blaming anyone. They may also feel protective of themselves and not want to reopen old pain. This book will not ask you to put anyone on trial. It will help you look at the conditions that shaped you with respect for the fact that you did what you had to do. The goal is not to stir up anger for its own sake. The goal is to understand what you learned about closeness so you can update those lessons as an adult. This book will give you a clearer picture of what dismissive avoidant attachment actually is. Many resources on attachment focus on avoidance in general, but dismissive avoidance has its own texture. It often looks like strength. It often gets praised in a culture that values independence. It can also hide loneliness, longing, and fear that the person has learned not to show. By focusing specifically on dismissive avoidance, this book aims to help you see the difference between healthy independence and protected distance. When you can tell the difference, you can keep what is good and soften what is hurting you. Another thing this book will give you is a sense of why change can feel so hard. People often assume that if you want a different relationship pattern, you should just do it. They think you should simply communicate more, be more vulnerable, or stop pulling away. Those instructions can feel impossible if your body reads vulnerability as danger. This book will explain the lived experience behind the resistance, the way certain moments can feel like losing control, losing dignity, or being pulled into emotional demands you cannot meet. When you understand why the resistance exists, you can approach change with patience rather than force. This often includes learning to recognize your early warning signals. For example, you might notice that you start feeling restless when someone asks for a talk, or you might notice a sudden urge to focus on a partner's flaws after a tender moment. You might notice irritation that feels out of proportion to what was said. Those signals are often the beginning of a protective move. This book will help you interpret those moments as information about your inner state, not as proof that the relationship is wrong. When you can interpret the signal, you can respond to it in a way that creates connection rather than distance. This book will also give you a gentler way to think about needs. Dismissive avoidant attachment often comes with a belief that needing is weakness. That belief can be so deep that you may not even realize it is shaping your choices. You might feel proud of not asking for much. You might prefer to solve your own problems. You might even feel uncomfortable when someone offers you care. The goal here is not to turn you into someone who suddenly depends on others for everything. The goal is to help you see that having needs is part of being human, and that expressing them does not have to cost you your independence. For partners of dismissive avoidance, this book will give you ways to protect your own heart. Understanding someone's attachment pattern does not mean sacrificing yourself. If you are always reaching and always being met with distance, you can begin to doubt your own worth. You can begin to shrink your needs, hoping that if you ask for less, you will finally be loved the way you want. This book is meant to help you keep your dignity. It will help you understand what is yours to do and what is not yours to carry. It will also give you a sense of what healthy closeness can look like for an avoidant person. Sometimes the idea of intimacy is described in a way that feels suffocating to someone who values space. Intimacy does not have to mean constant togetherness or endless emotional conversation. It can mean honesty, reliability, and the ability to repair when things go wrong. It can mean being able to take space and still stay connected. This book will help you imagine a version of closeness that is real and respectful, not a version that demands you become someone else. This book will give you a path that is realistic. Realistic does not mean small. It means grounded in how change actually happens. Many avoidant people try to change through sudden overexposure, forcing themselves into emotional conversations they are not ready for. That can backfire and create more retreat. A more realistic path is built through small moments of honesty and steady follow-through. It is built through learning how to name what you feel without feeling swallowed by it. It is built through learning how to hear your partner's feelings without interpreting them as a demand. This book will focus on that kind of step-by-step growth. It will also give you permission to be a whole person. Avoidant patterns can trap you in a narrow version of yourself, the version that is composed, capable, and untouched. That version may have kept you safe for a long time, but it can also keep you lonely. This book is here to help you make room for tenderness without losing your strength. It is here to help you hold your independence, while also allowing yourself to be known. The purpose of this book is not to push you into a certain kind of relationship, or to tell you what you should want. It is to help you understand the relationship you already have with closeness, with need, and with vulnerability. It will help you see your patterns clearly, and it will treat those patterns as understandable responses rather than as evidence of personal failure. Most of all, it will offer you hope that is not based on fantasy. It will offer you hope based on the simple truth that what was learned through experience can be softened through new experience, especially when you approach yourself with patience and respect.